You desperately need immigrants. If I were Europe, I would give those immigrants plane tickets. I would say, come on to Europe, but you won't let them in.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I must say, also, my own government has, for instance, for the new entrants into Europe, like Poland, they have now enacted law which make it more difficult for these people to come and join us. That was not our finest hour. And I agree with you that that was a setback. But Europe will learn. And if it doesn't learn, it will become a secondary piece of the earth, which will be ignored, and the decisions in this planet will be taken without Europe sitting at the table.
But look, the government may not change much, but I think these Eastern European countries joining into the unions, they can make a difference, because as I tried to explain, if wages don't become more realistic in Western Europe, business will move to the Eastern European countries. If it doesn't move there, it will move to China. So this is the choice.
But you both keep saying Europe has to change, and it will because it has to, but I don't see it on the horizon. I see everybody still looking for a handout.
There's no doubt about it that in the 60s, the UK economy was virtually on its knees.
Disaster.
And the major decisions in the UK society were taken by rather militant unions. Yes, they were setting the agenda, they were forcing the decisions. And I think we've seen a remarkable turnaround.
But Tony, remember, that happened after the UK went bankrupt. In the 1970s, the UK went bankrupt, had to be bailed out by the IMF, and along came Margaret Thatcher. Said, "Oh," and everybody said, "You know, we're right. We've gone bankrupt. The IMF had to bail us out. Let's have somebody save us." That after a crisis or a semi-crisis, you do have strong leaders. You saying we're going to have a crisis, or are you saying the strong leaders are out there?
What I did say to you is that it'll probably have to get a bit worse before it gets better. That I will concede to you, yes, because the sense of urgency at this moment in time is, if you look at our two major economic problems, that's Germany and France. Yes, the problem is not Ireland. The problem isn't Sweden. The problem isn't the UK at the moment. The problem is Germany and France. Well, the sense of urgency in Germany is very low. If you ask the average German how is life, he will probably say pretty good, because he's not affected yet. But the time will come that he will be affected. And there has to be change, because, as I said, the very liberal and the very elaborate social welfare which is in place both in France and in Germany is just not sustainable. Who's going to pay for it?
Do you think that the French farmers are going to give up their subsidies? Do you think that the German workers are going to give up, you know, having to work few months a year?
Well, if they don't give it up, and actually in Germany some unions have already made concessions when threatened by a company to close down the plant and to move to Slovakia. And it is on the way, this process. If the governments don't do it and if the voters won't do it, then economic conditions will force it upon them to eventually not have the subsidies, because the governments won't be able to pay them.
But at the moment, in Slovakia, 3 major car plants are being built in Slovakia. I think Slovakia will produce more cars the next 10 years than Germany will. Yes, that is unavoidable. But of course, what you expect is that in Western Europe, the economy will take a different turn. It will not rely so much on the industries of yesterday, like car making and shipbuilding, but it will rely more on the industries of tomorrow, like software, like high-tech companies. But in order to let that happen, of course, we must make sure that we encourage these industries to take place and not strangle them through over-regulation and high taxes.
But those things are not happening. You have over-strangulation. You have Brussels with all its regulations. You have the Germans with all their regulations. If the cars are made in Slovakia instead of Germany, who's going to pay for the Germans who are unemployed? Aren't they going to be unhappy? Do they want me to move to Germany so I can pay higher taxes to pay for the unemployed German car workers?
Well, look, I mean, this is a process which takes which has to be done step by step. The German Chancellor has already started the first steps on reform. The French political elite has realized that it can't stay with today, so they are looking at pensions. They are starting to look at the subsidies. Commissioner Fischler in Brussels has started to propose a new set of rules to rein in the subsidies on agriculture. So it has been started, but as usual, it is politically very difficult because the electorate will not like the initial pain and will punish the leadership. But eventually the electorate will realize, like they did in this country, for instance, 25 years ago, this country was in a mess. And I think there was a consensus in this country that we couldn't go on the way we did in 25 years ago. And people did swallow their medicine.
Either the resolution of the current problems will happen step by step, peacefully, or eventually you have a breakdown of the social system we have in Western Europe that may be painful.
I was working on within my company on a social project the other day, and there was a new graduate which had just joined us from university, was helping me with that, and I was just chatting to her, and I said, how many holidays do you really have per annum? And she said, I have 37 working days holiday. Now, who the hell wants 37 days when you're 25? Now, I'm not arguing that we should all go to the American ways where you have only 10 days or 2 weeks. We don't have to emulate everything we do in the US. But it has gone to extremes. And it has rendered us uncompetitive, and we need to resolve it.
Okay, but they all have it. Has anybody called you up and said, Tony, I want to give up 15 days of my holidays? Has everybody in Unilever said, this is crazy, let's give it up?
No, I don't think people do that, and I don't think you should expect people to do that, because why should she give it up? She won't get anything in return. But on a macro level, we can do something about it and say, look, can't we balance it in another way?
But I don't see anybody doing anything about it. Well, you both say it's going to happen, but when?
It has started to happen in many countries, and it will continue. I think people will also over time realize that even if their wages decline somewhat, if the overall price level declines more than their wages, their standards of living can actually improve, especially if at the same time taxation declines. So actually in Europe, in Western Europe, we could have kind of what I would call not exactly a deflationary boom, but a kind of a disinflation or deflation accompanied by an improvement in the standards of living.
So all the old people who are going to have to give up their pensions or have their pensions cut, but you're going to say to them, and they're going to say, okay, well, that's okay because my life is going to get better? I don't think so.
You see, it's like in Japan in the last 10 years. For the average Japanese, his salary level has stayed more or less the same. But the price of joining a golf club, the rents they pay for their homes have all declined dramatically. So actually, their standards of living in real terms has improved. If you can tell the elderly, look, of course we have to cut your pension somewhat, but at the same time, when you go to a store, you will buy goods cheaper, and when you hire someone to clean your house, that wage will be much lower, and if someone needs to come and fix your house, that cost will be also much lower. Then they're more likely to accept it than if you cut their pensions and at the same time you have inflation in all these product and service prices.
But I know Unilever has not cut prices. They can't cut prices. You haven't cut prices, have you? I mean,
well, I tell you that we have not seen very much price increases over the last couple of years, both, by the way, in North America and in Europe. So to assure a future based on price increases is a very dangerous strategy for any company to see. So normal goods and services, basic goods and services, relatively speaking, have become cheaper over the last 25 years. So in that supports the argument of the purchase price parity which people can expect. But the issue on people's pensions, if we take the steps now, yes, we can do it without major social disruption, and we can still take care of the real vulnerable people in society. That should not be the issue. But we need to move. Yes?
I know you need to move. That's why I'm sitting here shaking my head, and I'm skeptical, and that's why I don't think the euro is going to survive.
No, but we have started.
I know there's going to be a politician in Italy and a politician in Portugal and a politician in the Netherlands who's going to say prices are up because of the euro. It's all of Brussels' fault, and I got to get out.